After the first round of negotiations ended, requests for coverage from American media followed. CEO Darrell stated, "We are doing our best to negotiate," while Union Chairman Dennis maintained a tough stance, emphasizing that the possibility of a strike depends on the company's attitude. The second round of negotiations was scheduled for a week later. I spoke with Taekyu around lunchtime. It would be early morning in Seoul, but he usually stays up late. Is work going well? We're in negotiations. Nothing much happening at the company. Everything's good. With Taekyu holding down the fort and Henry and Sang-Yeep handling the practical matters, things should be running smoothly even in my absence. When will you be back? It seems like it'll take a while. Come back soon. It's boring alone. Okay. I hung up and re-entered the meeting room. Ellie was reviewing documents with one hand propping up her chin and the other twirling a pen. I said to her, "I'm sorry. I brought you all the way to America just to work." Upon hearing this, Ellie lifted her head. "It's fine. I came here to work after all. My original plan was to finish work reasonably and then drive around Lake Superior and Niagara, but the reality is that I'm overwhelmed with tasks. This is already my third trip to the US, and I haven't had a chance to properly tour anything. Coffee's here." When someone brought coffee, we each picked up our orders. I took a sip of my coffee, enjoying a moment of rest. The words research, development, production, sales that I had written on the whiteboard were still there. The headquarters handles research and development, factories manage production, and dealerships take care of sales. However, just because sales are separated doesn't mean that research and production must be distinct as well. Thinking back, the separation of research and production has been in place for a long time. Car companies, except for several key components like engines, outsource the production of other products to numerous suppliers. In this process, approximately 70 to 80% of the total operations are already completed. The car factory's role is similar to assembling Lego blocks, where it assembles delivered parts into a finished product. There's no rule that the assembly process must occur in factories owned by the final vehicle manufacturers, right? In actuality, some car types are entrusted to be produced at different companies' factories. This allows them to release and sell cars without owning a factory. I recalled the union representatives I saw during the first round of negotiations. They felt the fear that the factory could close at any moment, depending on the company's circumstances. This fear was justified as they had witnessed factories closing and workers being laid off during the financial crisis in the US. In the case of Keros, a software company acquired an existing car manufacturer, creating a structure where it's easier to separate research and development from production. While sales are declining, new factories are being built. Naturally, existing factory workers must feel job insecurity. GM withdrew from factories in India and Indonesia, sold its subsidiaries in Thailand and Russia, and recently even closed its Australian factory. This clearly showed that the headquarters can shift production bases wherever profit is pursued. Consumers don't care where the cars are produced, and shareholders may be pleased if profitability increases, but what must the workers who suddenly lost their jobs feel? Ellie came closer to me and asked, "What are you thinking?" "I'm considering how to persuade the union. What if we pressure them by saying we'll close existing factories, discontinue current vehicles, and outsource production of new models elsewhere? If this happens, a strike by the union would lose its meaning. If we say we'll provide production volume, there would be plenty of places that would welcome us with open arms." Ellie chuckled at my suggestion. "Do you really think you can do that?" After a moment's thought, I shook my head. "I think it would be difficult. It's just not my style. After all, those people go home and are heads of households. They likely have loving spouses, children to raise, and loans to repay. Right now, I find myself in a managerial position by chance, but I don't have difficulty understanding the perspective of the workers. Labor management relations are ultimately human relations. Even when in conflict for each other's interests, shouldn't respect and understanding be the foundation?" Ellie said with a wink, "You know? It's those aspects of you that I find attractive." I scratched my head, feeling shy. Isn't it hard? Compared to working under Jessica, this is just a piece of cake. Aren't the Golden Gate employees the ones who really need to strike? The second round of negotiations began. We sat across from each other at the negotiation table again. Even now, it's still an unadaptable physical presence. What kind of work in a factory creates that level of muscle? Dennis came out strong from the start. Since we can't do overtime or special shifts, shouldn't you compensate for that? Daryl shot back. So, if overtime and special shifts increase later, will you lower the base salary then? That's completely out of the question. Once wages go up, they never go down. Sure enough, Dennis said, that's something we can think about later. Before we took over, Chrysler's sales had been very poor. Compared to the other big three, GM and Ford, it was almost embarrassing, and within the FCA group, it was treated like an ugly duckling. Since the sales slump had persisted for a long time, the wages and benefits that current workers received were lower than those in the same industry. That's why they were fighting like this. Hours into the negotiations, the disagreement remained unresolved. The union demanded wage increases and better benefits, while the management pulled out the company's financial statements, saying it was difficult. The union mentioned the management's failures and requested a chance for employee participation in management, which the management dismissed as nonsense. At this rate, even negotiating all day wouldn't yield results. I pondered. Once the new car is released, profits will significantly improve. However, those profits will need to be reinvested in electric vehicles. For the next few years, the cycle of reinvesting profits would likely continue. Why wouldn't I want to treat our company's employees well? It's natural for the fruits of growth to be shared not only with shareholders and management but also with the workers. Treating workers well and nurturing their potential ultimately increases the company's value. The problem is that it's tough right now. Finishing my thoughts, I spoke up. Let's do this. We will raise wages by 6% every year. The same goes for various allowances. We will gradually increase benefits like vacation pay, children's tuition, and medical expenses to match above the industry average. Dennis fell silent while Daryl shouted in surprise. Sir. I continued speaking without paying heed. But due to the current state of the company, immediate implementation is impossible. We will need to set a timeline. Bang. Dennis slammed his fist on the table and shouted. I've heard promises like that countless times. You say you'll do it later, then change your mind. Do you think I've only seen that happen once or twice? I quickly continued before a punch came my way. Let me rephrase. We will implement the basic salary increase and bonus increase in 2 years, regardless of the company situation. The raised amounts will be paid out all at once after 2 years, and the increased rates will also be applied cumulatively. Although we can't retroactively apply benefits, I will make sure they are at least competitive. Dennis looked taken aback by my words. I joked. I know how hard the auto factory workers work. If I were asked to work, I wouldn't last half a day before collapsing. Fortunately, a few laughed lightly, easing the atmosphere. I will do everything I can. But the union must also cooperate with the company. This is a critical time where labor and management need to unite. Management will handle the management side, but we absolutely need the workers' help with production. Significant changes are coming to the automotive industry. We must adapt quickly to these changes. Companies with rigid labor structures will be eliminated, while those that respond flexibly will survive. The union representatives looked bewildered, perhaps not expecting me to make such concessions. I said to them, so shall we draft the negotiation plan now? After 15 hours of negotiations, we reached a compromise. First, we fully accepted the union's demands regarding a ban on layoffs, job security, and extending retirement age. My proposal to implement wage increases and benefits starting in 2 years was accepted by the union. The management will decide on issues like the transfer of production lines and employee training, but the union will cooperate as much as possible, agreeing to work together on various measures needed to enhance productivity. Another crucial point is that if the company faces danger, the majority shareholder OTK company will invest to provide support. Union Chairman Dennis Block took the proposed agreement for a vote, and nearly 90% of the members approved it, allowing the plan to pass. It was a clear sign of trust in the management. CEO Daryl and Union Chairman Dennis signed the agreement and shook hands, successfully concluding the negotiations. The next negotiations will be in 4 years, allowing for some relief until then. During the negotiations, CNN and NBC, which had been diligently interviewing workers, published only brief articles once the deal was finalized. In contrast, the local Fox News covered it as a major story and provided positive feedback. For the record, Fox News is pro-Republican and pro-Ronald, unlike CNN and NBC. The Kairos Labor Management Agreement is a model of labor management cooperation. The company promises wage increases and job expansion, while the union commits to enhancing productivity, opening the path to coexistence for Kairos labor and management. Ronald quickly tweeted a link to the article despite being in Europe. Welcome to the Kairos Labor Management Agreement. The American auto unions are different from the Korean Unsung Motor Union that only strikes. American workers are always ready to talk with the management for more jobs. He also posted a graph comparing wages and productivity between Unsung's Georgia factory and the Ulsan factory. It was clear that the Georgia factory had lower wages but higher productivity. In short, it was a message urging to build factories in the US because American workers excel. Now even Ronald is criticizing the Unsung Union. Honestly, the Unsung Union should reflect. It's amazing how the company isn't failing given their actions. Unsung's management and union behave the same way. Last year's strike, the year before strike, and another strike this year. I'm betting my entire fortune on the strikes next year and the year after. Isn't the annual salary for production workers at Unsung Motors nearly 100 million won? I also want to work at Unsung Motors. The funny thing about Unsung Motors is that they go to great lengths to destroy the union of their partner company Wusong Corporation, yet they can't do anything about their own union. Suddenly targeted, the Unsung Motors union strongly protested, issuing a detailed rebuttal in a press release. They argue that, strictly by base salary, wages in Korea are low, and due to the characteristics of Korean factories primarily manufacturing high-end vehicles, it's unreasonable to uniformly apply HPV, hours per vehicle. They officially demanded an apology from Ronald under the union chairman's name. The Unsung Motors union chairman demanding an apology from the US president is something else entirely. Can the union achieve what even the president cannot? Are you watching, Ronald? There is someone here with more power than you. Bow down, Ronald. This is the level of you in the Unsung Motors union. Attached photo. Here are the pay slips for workers at the Georgia plant and the Ulsan plant. Base pay is slightly lower in Korea, but overtime and various allowances are overwhelmingly higher. When comparing national income and average worker wages, the gap increases further. The Unsung Motors union chairman's demand for an apology became a viral sensation online, spawning various parodies. Even conservative Korean media mentioned Ronald's tweet, urging a cessation of unreasonable strikes and the need for cooperation between labor and management. Yet despite this, the Unsung Motors union announced plans for strong action again this year. I watched TV with Ellie at a Western pub near the office. On the screen, Union Chairman Dennis Block and CO Daryl Seguin held each other's hands. It wasn't live, it was the news. Local Fox News covered the labor agreement as a major story, reporting on it daily. Ellie said to me, "Luckily it was resolved well." I smiled. At least we can say the urgent fire has been put out. To keep the promises made to the union, the new car must be a success. There is still much to do. The atmosphere here is nice. The beer tastes even better. There's a reason everyone recommends this place. Since coming to Detroit, I had only been between the hotel, the office, and the negotiation room without seeing the surroundings even once. Even if we couldn't go far, I thought about taking a break, so I went out with Ellie. I had been told the beer and hamburgers here were delicious. I looked around the pub. True to its automotive city reputation, the walls were decorated with wheels and license plates. The aged interior seemed to tell the story of this place. The owner, a white old man who likely had some strength in his youth, has been running this pub since his younger days. It was still early for drinking, so there were only a few people. If I came in the evening after work, it would probably be a lively atmosphere. After a while, our ordered hamburgers and fries arrived. They were enormous compared to franchise burgers. Would we be able to finish these together? While I was thinking this, the owner opened a bottle of liquor and filled 2 glasses, placing them in front of us. What's this? Singles malt whiskey. It's the most expensive drink we have here. We didn't order this. That's on me. Pardon. The owner smiled gently. I thought you looked familiar from the moment you walked in, and I just remembered who you are. I felt a bit flustered. Could he really recognize me? Typically, Westerners have difficulty distinguishing East Asian faces, so I hadn't disguised myself in any special way. Thanks to you, Detroit is coming back to life. My son, who was unemployed, has found a job and people are no longer leaving the city. I was actually considering closing up shop here, but as more customers come in, I can keep the business going. Not long ago, Detroit symbolized the decline of American manufacturing. In 2013, it filed for bankruptcy with $18 billion in debt, plagued by crime and deterioration throughout the city. However, things turned around 180 degrees with Ronald's election. The manufacturing sector revived, factories that had moved overseas returned, and Detroit made a spectacular comeback. The city's atmosphere was certainly different from when I last visited. The downtown area was bustling with energy and construction was happening everywhere. New hotels and bars had opened and there were many tourists. The owner spoke to me. "You saved this city. On behalf of Detroit, let me buy today's drinks." Honestly, this was less about me and more about GM and Ford's increased sales, as well as the large construction and financial firms that had come in to start various ventures. Of course, I had initiated those investments. Nonetheless, thinking about how my actions sparked a big change in the city felt strangely rewarding. Ellie smiled and said, "It's too much for just the two of us, so let's drink together. I need to prepare for the evening business soon, but sure, let's drink for now." The owner took out glasses and filled them generously. As we clinked our glasses together, a voice came from behind us. "Can I have a drink too?" Turning my head, I noticed a muscular, bald, middle-aged man standing over 2 meters tall. He looked unmistakably like a professional wrestler, but his name was not Big Show. It was Dennis Block. "What brings you here?" "I heard you would be here, so I came to check it out." "Did he come just to see me?" The owner filled a glass and handed it to him. "Watched you on TV, Dennis." "It's been a while, Ben. How have you been?" From their conversation it seemed he was a regular. Dennis downed his whiskey in one go. Last year, when some wealthy Asian said he would take over the company, everyone was worried. After all, American firms have had their fair share of trouble with Asian investors. Ellie asked, "Are you talking about Japan and China?" Even after World War II, the US was the manufacturing powerhouse. Ironically, it was Japan, a defeated country, that threw down the challenge. The influx of Japanese electronics and cars caused the American manufacturing sector to collapse. Japan used that money to buy up American companies and real estate indiscriminately, even acquiring Columbia Pictures and Rockefeller Center. However, when the real estate bubble burst, Japan's economy sank dramatically. Then China took its place. After embarking on reform and opening up, China became the world's factory in just a few years. Like Japan before it, it swallowed up global companies with its surplus capital. Some companies thrive with proper support, but many others are simply exploited and discarded. I nodded in agreement. There was a similar situation in our country. Are you talking about Chongryong Motors? You know well. China's Shanghai Automotive acquired Chongryong Automotive for a low price, extracting only the technology before reselling it. In the process, mass layoffs occurred, causing many workers to lose their jobs. Dennis said while drinking. "I was unsure whether you had any interest in a manufacturing plant, let alone research and development. I was quite surprised to see you in the negotiating room. It's rare for a CEO to negotiate directly with a union. However, we had the CEO personally oversee the negotiations from start to finish. Because of that, both I and the union members felt it was worth trusting you at least once." I smiled. After hearing that, it seems my trip to America wasn't in vain. True feelings tend to resonate. Dennis extended his hand. "I hope to work well with you from now on." I grasped that hand. "I hope to do the same. Please remember that the fates of countless workers depend on your leadership." "Pardon?" Dennis grinned. "Haha, I didn't mean to put pressure on you. It feels like the alcohol I just drank is lodged in my throat." Just then a group of people entered. "Hey Ben. How have you been?" The owner pointed at me and said, "Welcome, Vernon. Perfect timing. Let's see who's here at our pub." They looked at me, blinking in surprise. Their expressions seemed to say, "Who is this Oriental guy?" One of them gasped and exclaimed, "Could it be Mr. Kong?" "What? Is it really him? That Kong Jin-hu? Nice to meet you." "Yes. Nice to meet you too." I greeted them and raised a toast. But that was just the beginning. Suddenly, customers flooded in after recognizing who I was. Without the owner needing to say a word, Those who had already been there informed the newcomers and they cheered. Ellie playfully remarked, "I didn't know this city loved Jinhu so much. I'm feeling a bit jealous." Before long the pub was packed. People eagerly offered me drinks. If I drank everything they handed me, I'd be in serious trouble. To Karos. To the hope of Detroit, Kong Jinhu. Before long I might just die of embarrassment. The next day, I groaned from a hangover as I met with the partner company CEOs. Most were white, but there were a few black and Hispanic individuals as well. I greeted them. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Kong Jinhu, CEO of OTK Company. Fortunately, we have concluded our labor negotiations peacefully without a strike, but I believe everyone is aware that these are difficult times." The expressions of the CEOs darkened at my words. They were worried that I might ask for a price reduction. The easiest way for an automaker to increase profits is by cutting costs. If a part that used to be supplied for $1 is lowered to 95 cents, they gain 5 cents per unit. The partner companies facing declining sales were no exception. Some would be in worse circumstances than us. I have no intention of squeezing partner companies for our growth. For instance, Unsung Motors has a notorious reputation for continuously lowering supply prices by sending out an outsourcing cost calculation sheet. Unless there's a valid reason such as a drop in raw material prices, lowering supply prices ultimately diminishes the competitiveness of partner companies. When supply prices drop, partner companies have no choice but to reduce labor costs or cut back on technological development and investment. This eventually harms the overall competitiveness of the manufacturing sector and rebounds negatively on the automakers. It may be acceptable if we continue to produce the same cars, but in times of change we all must contemplate growth together. Rest assured, I'm not here to discuss lowering supply prices first. At my words, the expressions of the partner company CEOs brightened. I then spoke about the current trends in the automotive market. We must prepare for a transition to electric vehicles within a few years. Electric vehicles will be equipped with motors and batteries instead of engines and transmissions. The number of parts will reduce to a third, and all key components will change. While the production of electric vehicles may be limited due to battery supply constraints, we can transition faster than competitors since we are building our own battery factory. Our company, along with our partner companies, must adapt to these changes. In the future, we will share development plans and actively support technology and funding. You here are not merely subcontractors supplying parts but crucial partners in opening a future with Karos. I hope we can continue to grow together. Next, Daryl stepped up to explain the new cars set to be released in the second half of the year and requested assistance from partner companies. After the meeting with the partner company presidents, I reached out to the dealers this time. Unlike the partner companies, which are mainly concentrated in the Rust Belt, the dealers are spread across the United States. Considering they are likely busy, I couldn't ask them to fly to Detroit. So I sent an email. It was similar to what I had shared with the partner company presidents. Due to the last incident, several large dealer firms have already turned their backs and partnered with other car manufacturers. Many of the dealers currently with us are staying not out of preference but out of necessity. If they had been offered better conditions elsewhere, they'd likely have switched long ago. I informed them about the detailed plans for the new car launch and promised to meet supply quantities as a top priority partner. In the future, we plan to engage in direct sales online like Tesla, but that doesn't mean I intend to completely exclude the dealers we currently have relationships with. I believe those who have remained loyal until the end deserve fair treatment. This wrapped up my tasks in Detroit. In the meantime, I heard news from Korea that OTK Company held the founding ceremony for its esports team, OTK Magicians. Ji-hong took the lead in the ceremony on behalf of the reclusive otaku. The already skilled players have either joined large esports teams or moved to China, so the team was formed with second-string players and those whose skills haven't been verified. Netizens expressed concerns about whether that lineup could even make it to the finals, but, well, it's just the vice president's hobby, so it doesn't really matter. It's not like a lot of money is being spent. I checked out of the hotel with Ellie and greeted each executive from the headquarters. I shook hands with Daryl and said, "Please keep up the hard work until the new car launch. Of course, I've informed the lab so they'll be waiting for you when you arrive. Hey, see you next time. My schedule in the US isn't completely over yet. I boarded the plane to San Francisco with Ellie. To the south of San Francisco lies Silicon Valley, the largest hub of the IT industry in the United States. The reason for going there is that a presentation on the autonomous driving technology to be installed in the new car is scheduled at the Research Institute. I also need to check on the situation at the lab. As the plane took off, Ellie said with a hint of disappointment, "I wanted to see Niagara Falls at least once." I felt the same. I wished I could go all the way up to Canada. I never expected that my trip to the US would turn into just work without any sightseeing. I think a road trip by car would have been fun. From Detroit to Silicon Valley? It's roughly 4,000 kilometers. Even if we drive non-stop at 100 kilometers per hour, won't it take around 40 hours? We could stop by other cities along the way to check them out. Wouldn't that take at least a month? It's a journey crossing the US from east to west. It would be fun though. At my age, I never thought I'd be managing a company instead of traveling. Once I finish work, let's explore everything. Someone once said that when busy work passes, even busier work will come. Who said that? Jessica. It sounded like a truth gleaned from experience and I couldn't refute it. Ellie suddenly stared at my face closely. But you've looked a bit off since earlier. Are you okay? Actually, I had a slight headache and felt a bit nauseous. Hearing my symptoms, Ellie said, "Are you feeling motion sickness?" Maybe that's it. I had never felt sick on a plane before, so I was unsure if this was indeed motion sickness. Ellie looked worried. "It might just be that you're not feeling well. You've had a lot of stress lately." "Is that so?" I forced a smile. "Just take some rest and you'll feel better. Don't worry." I reclined my seat and lay back trying to catch my breath. Seemed to help calm me a bit. I skipped the in-flight meal because my stomach was uneasy. In the meantime, a huge city appeared outside the window. Fortunately, by the time the plane landed, my headache and nausea had improved somewhat. It really was motion sickness, I guess. Ellie let out a sigh of relief. "I'm glad. Do you think you need to go to the hospital?" "Of course not." However, the moment I stepped out of the plane and onto the airport ground, I felt an intense sense of alienation that was hard to put into words. It was as if something was just on the tip of my mind. When I suddenly stopped walking, Ellie asked, "What's wrong?" I shook my head. Nothing at all. Was it truly stress? Since I had taken a domestic flight, there were no immigration procedures. After picking up our luggage, security personnel were waiting for us. We exited the airport and got into the arranged car. It took less than 30 minutes to reach Silicon Valley from the airport. The car headed straight to the hotel. The hotel layout included a living room and 2 bedrooms. We entered our respective bedrooms and unpacked. "You must be tired from the flight. Get some rest." "And you?" "I'm going downstairs to work out. I haven't exercised in a few days and my body feels sluggish." Exercising even while on a business trip? It's clear that such a figure isn't maintained without effort. Ellie changed into form-fitting workout clothes and headed to the hotel fitness center. I lay back on the sofa, eyes closed, without even changing clothes. How much time had passed? I opened my eyes at the sound of the door opening, and there was Ellie returning. She was soaked as if she had been caught in the rain, with her hair and body drenched. I looked out the window. Beyond the glass, the emerald San Francisco Bay unfolded. The weather was brightly sunny. Could it be that it wasn't the rain but sweat that soaked her? "You're awake. Shouldn't you sleep more?" "I'm fine now. But what kind of exercise did you do?" "There's a squash court in the hotel, so I played a lot for the first time in ages. I wish you could have come too. We went together once before and I almost threw up." I checked the time. It felt like I just briefly closed my eyes, yet 2 hours had already passed. "Do you want to go for a walk? We can grab a coffee too. We'll have plenty of work to do from tomorrow anyway." I nodded. "That sounds good. Wait a minute. I'll take a shower and be right out." Ellie came out after taking a shower, changed into clothes. She wore a white off-the-shoulder blouse and a sky-blue long flared skirt that reached close to her ankles, paired with slightly heeled sandals. "How do I look?" I gave a thumbs up. "You look beautiful as always." She didn't put on any particular makeup, yet her beauty was radiating today. I chose to wear jeans and a t-shirt instead of a suit with sneakers. "Let's go." As we left the hotel, Ellie naturally linked her arm with mine. The weather was truly perfect spring weather. We wore sunglasses to block the sunlight. Though the city is generally safe, one can't be too careful. Male and female security guards followed us at a certain distance. They were also in casual clothes, looking just like a couple on a date, although they might be hiding a gun. The mix of various ethnicities felt just right for the term melting pot. East Asians were quite common as well, and not just a few were wearing sunglasses. Thanks to that, we didn't attract any attention. Which was just wishful thinking. Ellie's figure walking down the street in sunglasses was enough to catch the eye of those around us. I could hear whispers questioning if she was a model. Do I look like an IT specialist or an international student? Ellie moved closer and said, "How about that cafe? Want to grab a coffee there?" "That sounds good." We crossed the street and settled at a table on the terrace of a nearby outdoor cafe. I ordered a seafood salad and a sandwich along with my coffee. As I returned with the coffee, I noticed a blonde young man in his late 20s trying to hit on Ellie. "Are you here on vacation?" "No, I'm on a business trip from Korea." "Oh, Korea. Nice to meet you. I'm Kevin Anderson. I work nearby." "Nice to meet you, Kevin. What do you do?" "I'm currently working as an engineer at M Pizza. If you have some time." Ellie playfully laughed. "Oh, so you work at M Pizza. What a coincidence, the major shareholder of that company is standing right behind you." "Excuse me." Ellie pointed to me and the man turned around. Instead of speaking, I slightly lifted my sunglasses. He quickly recognized me, his mouth dropping open in shock. "Whoa. No way, Kong." "Shoo." I brought my finger to my lips. He then reached out his hand to me. "Ma, it's an honor to meet you. I heard you're in Detroit." "I'm done with that side of things. Anyway, it's nice to meet you too. Please continue to support M Pizza." "Yes, of course." He quickly returned to his seat. As I sat down, Ellie smiled and said, "Did you see? Your popularity is this high." "Popularity is expected, but I never thought it would lead to being hunted this quickly. I guess I can't leave you alone anymore." "That's okay. In my eyes, Jean Hu is the coolest." Hearing that makes me feel a bit relieved. Ellie sipped her coffee and said, "The weather is really nice. I was right to come out, right?" "Indeed. The spring sunshine feels warm. Unlike Korea, there are no fine dust particles or yellow dust." Sitting on the terrace, basking in the sun, I could understand why everyone wanted to live here. Of course, to do that, one has to endure the exorbitant rent and cost of living. With the world's top talent flocking in, housing prices in San Francisco are skyrocketing day by day. Currently, the median price of an apartment in Seoul is about 500 million won, while in San Francisco it's 1 billion won. Homes exceeding 10 billion won are common, and the rent for shabby studio apartments on the outskirts of the city is in the millions. Those who cannot afford the rent are pushed out of the city or forced into homelessness. In fact, housing instability due to high real estate prices has become a social issue. As high as the housing prices are, income levels are also high. Earning over $100,000 a year places you in the high-income bracket in any country, but in Silicon Valley, you need to earn over $200,000 to be considered middle class. Isn't it true that even New York Manhattan, where financial elites gather, might not reach this level? It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a place where the world's most talented individuals and the wealthiest reside. I think living in a place like this wouldn't be bad after I quit my job. Should I buy a house before prices go up? The fact that it's a city by the sea is similar to Hong Kong, but the atmosphere is definitely different. What's Hong Kong like? After my question, Ellie paused to think. Well, there's this vibe where it doesn't feel strange to see a rundown building about to collapse next to shiny skyscrapers. It's like East and West, past and present, are mixed together in harmony. Oh, I think I understand that feeling. In comparison, this place is much cleaner and more relaxed. I looked at the people on the street. Their expressions were lively and their steps were calm. The presence of a lot of IT workers probably influences that. Ellie shared some episodes from her time in Hong Kong. Do you know how popular Jessica was there? There was a wealthy Chinese man in his 30s who proposed to her on the spot with a diamond ring the size of a fist. Really? That's a new story to me. It's an exaggeration to say it was fist-sized, but he really did bring a diamond ring. So what did she do? What do you think she did? She flat out rejected him. There were plenty of other guys who hit on Jessica too. She was even more popular than I was. Is Hyunju Nuna that popular? Objectively speaking, Hyunju Nuna is indeed beautiful. She seems to have a strong appeal to those with specific tastes. Of course, since I don't share that taste, I'm not sure. By the way, I keep feeling like something has been off since earlier. Is it just my imagination? The next day, we headed to the Research Institute by car. As a global company, Samsung Electronics has various research institutes in Silicon Valley, collaborating with several IT companies. At the Research Institute for the Defense Business in San Jose, the research teams from Samsung Electronics and Kairos were actively working on software stabilization and mass production. Developing technology and mass production are entirely different issues. For a specific technology to have marketability, it must overcome numerous obstacles. The most critical factor is price. How many products have failed to commercialize due to pricing? Even electric and hydrogen vehicles are significantly more expensive than internal combustion engine cars. The only reason we can achieve competitive pricing is thanks to government subsidies. While eco-friendly cars have subsidies, autonomous vehicles do not. Ultimately, we must lower costs as much as we can. No matter how good the technology, high prices will limit demand. Realistically, to sell to the public, the limit for sedans would be $40,000 and for SUVs $50,000. Lower would be better. The vehicle's cost ends up being similar. The real issue lies in the cost of autonomous driving components. The equipment installed in the prototype vehicles can only be produced in small quantities, so it's naturally expensive. Setting up a mass production system could significantly lower costs. However, that requires considerable investment. In the end, achieving economies of scale seems to be the key. When we arrived at the Research Institute, an unexpected person was already there. Huh. A man in his 40s with glasses reached out his hand toward me. It's good to see you here. Surprised, I asked. What brings you here? Chairman, I'm Jin Yong, smiled as he replied. I hurriedly flew in on a private jet after hearing that you would be coming to Silicon Valley. The fact that I was coming was already shared with the Samsung Electronics research team. It's likely that the head office of Samsung Electronics has been informed as well. But was it really necessary to come all the way to America? Don't you have anything to do in Korea? Thank you for coming. We shook hands. At that moment, a hologram appeared before me for the first time in a while. The second largest shareholder of Kairos, Samsung Electronics. Chairman Im Jin-young was looking at me with a strange expression. What's wrong? It's nothing. Let's go in. Ellie asked me in a small voice. Are you really okay? Of course. Do you realize you've been acting a bit strange since yesterday? I made a vague response. I just sometimes zone out. What does it mean that Samsung Electronics is the second largest shareholder of Kairos? Currently, the largest shareholder of Kairos is obviously OTK Company, which holds 96% of the shares. Then, Daryl has 1.5%, and the remaining 2.5% is divided among the executives. For Samsung Electronics to become the second largest shareholder, they would need to issue new shares assigned to Samsung Electronics or buy the shares held by OTK Company. I used to discuss these things with Take-Yu after seeing Oracle, but right now he's playing on the other side of the Pacific. Should I give him a call? While I was lost in these thoughts, Chairman Im Jin-young and Ellie exchanged greetings. Nice to meet you. I'm Im Jin-young, Chairman of Samsung Electronics. Nice to meet you. I'm Ellie Kim, a lawyer from the legal team of the Korean branch of Golden Gate. This was the first time they had met in person. Of course, Ellie knew Chairman Im Jin-young. And it was the same for Chairman Im. I've heard a lot about you. I heard you moved from the Asian branch to the Korean branch with Director Oh Hyunju and have played a significant role in OTK Company's various investments. He knows quite a bit. Ellie smiled and said, Thank you for saying that. Chairman Im Jin-young led us inside. All right, let's go in. Hank McDonnell, the head of the Samsung Electronics Research Institute, greeted us and guided us through the facility. Everyone was dressed casually, moving about freely. Among the employees, several Koreans were visible. We toured the Research Institute, receiving briefings from the researchers. All tests, including trial runs, were already completed, leaving only mass production. However, there are several hurdles to that. The technology presentation is in 3 days. Specific plans for the new car will also be unveiled then. As I listened, I thought about the recent prophecy. It was natural for Chairman Im Jin-young to appear here for that reason, right? So what proposal could he possibly have? Issuing new shares to a third party? Or perhaps a request to buy shares? Despite spending so much through the Herman acquisition and stock buybacks, Samsung Electronics still holds nearly 50 trillion won in cash. This amount could easily acquire a substantial car company. Of course, even if they offered that money, I wouldn't sell Keros. Lost in thought, I subtly stood up. I'll be right back, I need to use the bathroom. Once inside, confirming that no one was there, I called Taekyu. Although it was night in Korea, he answered immediately. What's up? I'm at the Research Institute right now. I informed him about meeting Chairman Im Jin-young and the prophecy. Taekyu replied, seemingly surprised. Oh. Samsung becoming the second largest shareholder? Does that mean they will buy our shares? That seems likely. But since there's no urgent need for cash, I don't have a reason to sell shares at this point. I'd rather issue bonds. Then wouldn't they make some proposal that could benefit us too? Think of the Samsung SB situation. Thinking about the Samsung SB situation. In that moment, something came to mind. I think I have an idea of what kind of proposal they might make. What is it? I'll tell you later. We sat in the meeting room sipping coffee. Chairman Im Jin-young gazed out the window. The weather was sunny just like yesterday. Coming from Seoul to here, the air is definitely better. Is there still a lot of fine dust these days? At my question, Im Jin-young shook his head. Of course. I don't know when it became so hard to see a clear sky in Seoul. On bad days, it's hard to tell if I'm in Seoul or Beijing. He probably didn't come all the way to the US just to get some fresh air. He is the chairman of the Samsung Group. There are many subsidiaries to manage, not just Samsung Electronics. He must be busy handling important schedules, so coming here means there's a compelling reason. Im Jin-young casually started talking. I have something to discuss. I'd like to speak with you privately. I'll step out for a moment. I stopped Ellie, who was about to get up, and turned to Im Jin-young. It's fine, you can just go ahead. Im Jin-young looked slightly surprised, glancing back and forth between Ellie and me. Then he seemed to realize something, his expression shifting to one of surprise. Are you too? You're probably thinking correctly. At my words, Im Jin-young burst into laughter. Ah, this is surprising. I thought you were just focused on work, but turns out you're dating as well. I'd appreciate it if you kept this a secret. I'm not a celebrity and I don't want my personal life in the media. It could also interfere with Ellie's work. Of course. Anyway, congratulations. Though Im Jin-young belongs to the younger group of chaebols, he has likely been thoroughly educated since childhood to inherit the group. In contrast, I've only attended business school for a year and a half. Naturally, his abilities in management and negotiation far surpass mine. His unannounced appearance in this meeting is likely a strategy to gain an advantage in negotiations. However, if you know in advance what the other party will propose, you can prepare a countermeasure. Chairman Im Jin-young brought up the topic. The biggest issue in mass production of autonomous driving hardware is the price. We have tried to lower the unit costs through modularization, but as of now, it's unrealistic to go below $30,000. Compared to the equipment mounted for experiments costing over $100,000, it's not even a third of that price, but essentially it's the price of a car. The prices of various sensors like 3D cameras, LiDAR, radar and ultrasound are also expensive, and the costs for AP and semiconductors are significant as well. Everyone knows that autonomous driving is a great technology. However, to sell a product, a realistic price must be presented. Isn't there a way to lower the price further? There are two methods. First is to establish a mass production system through large-scale facility investment, and second is for Samsung Electronics to give up a portion of its margin. Then it could be lowered to $15,000. But to do that, we need assurance that both companies will continue to cooperate. I could guess what he was trying to say, but I pretended not to understand and asked, "Are you looking for a long-term contract or an exclusive agreement?" "I'm thinking beyond that." "What is it?" Chairman Im Jin-young looked at me and said, "I would like to propose a share exchange between Samsung Electronics and Keros." As expected, Samsung Electronics earned more than 40 trillion won in operating profit last year alone. This level ranks among the top companies globally. To return value to shareholders, it conducted several large-scale stock buybacks, holding an impressive 13% of its common stock as treasury shares. Initially, There was a prevailing opinion that the treasury shares would be used for converting into a holding company. However, since the group is already fully controlled, there was no need for that. Chairman Im Jin-young has repeatedly stated that he does not intend to split the business divisions or convert to a holding company. As a result, there were various opinions internally about how to utilize the treasury shares. What shareholders mainly desire is a cancellation of shares. By doing so, they can increase the per-share value without paying any taxes. But are they suggesting using the treasury shares now to acquire a stake in Keros? In this case, Chairman Im Jin-young has two advantages. First, he can acquire a stake in Keros without spending money immediately, and second, he can secure friendly shares equivalent to the amount of treasury shares given. From our perspective, it's not a bad deal. Samsung Electronics stock is certainly worth considering. The crucial point is the exchange ratio. The value of Samsung Electronics has already been determined by the market. After reaching an all-time high of 2.61 million won, the stock has since declined to around 2.3 million won, with a market cap of about 300 trillion won, including preferred shares. It rises to 330 trillion won. So what is the value of Keros? That's a good proposal, but what do you think about the ratio? Chairman Im Jin-young responded as if he had been waiting for the question. I would like an exchange ratio of 1 to 4, where 7.5% of Samsung Electronics treasury shares secures 30% of Keros' stake. This implies that Keros is valued at a quarter of Samsung Electronics, or 75 trillion won. That's more than GM's market cap and even exceeds Tesla's. Considering I have already invested about 30 trillion won, this means an additional premium of 45 trillion won. It's a more generous offer than I expected. Ellie also seemed slightly surprised. I pretended to think and then replied, I agree with your proposal, but I believe we need to think about the ratio a bit more. Chairman Im Jin-young tapped the table with his finger and said, Is that so? In fact, the 1 to 4 ratio was set a bit overly ambitiously from my perspective. I wonder if the shareholders will agree. Could that be true? Naturally, Chairman Im wouldn't make such a proposal out of consideration for me. He must have deemed it beneficial for himself and Samsung Electronics. In a system managed by professional managers, one might expect otherwise, but in a chaebol management system, decision-making occurs in a top-down manner. Therefore, the chairman's will is paramount. So how strong is Chairman Im's will? I recalled the vision I had seen earlier. If you already know the outcome, you can guide the negotiations in a much more favorable direction. What about a 1 to 2 ratio? At my words, Chairman Im looked incredulous. Are you serious? Of course. A 1 to 2 ratio would value Keros at 150 trillion. Do you really think it's worth that? Not at present, but the future is different. Tesla, which can't sell even 100,000 units per year, has a similar market capitalization to GM, which sells 10 million units annually. This is because Tesla's future value is evaluated so highly, right? The same can be said for Keros. Even if internal combustion cars transition to electric vehicles for drivers, it's hard to find differences other than reduced fuel costs and a change in charging methods. However, if a car that was previously driven manually starts moving on its own, much will change. I added, moreover, unlike Tesla, we have secured sufficient production capacity. Currently, Tesla is struggling in a production hell. No matter how well items sell, it's pointless if production fails. Chairman Im spoke confidently. To commercialize autonomous driving, hardware performance must be supported. Only Samsung Electronics worldwide has cutting-edge technology and a vertically integrated mass production system. Realistically, finding a better partner than Samsung Electronics is difficult. That's why even competitors like Apple rely on Samsung Electronics for parts. Samsung Electronics is the largest IT manufacturer in the world, but it lacks its own software. Consequently, it has often been dragged along by software companies. Take smartphones, for instance. Samsung Electronics creates and markets the products, but companies like Google earn money through various app fees. This is why they're trying to acquire partial ownership of the software held by Keros through a stake exchange. Exchanging shares is certainly a way to establish a solid trust relationship. However, I have no intention of being dragged along in negotiations. I leaned back and said, Apple makes its PCs and smartphones using its own OS. On the other hand, Google and Microsoft adopt a strategy of selling OS to hardware manufacturers or consumers. There's no definitive answer as to which approach is correct. I smiled and remarked, if we offer to supply autonomous driving software, there will be plenty of companies that can handle vehicle manufacturing on their own. It highlighted that collaboration with Samsung Electronics is not a necessity. Chairman Im Jin-young smiled but had a look in his eyes as if he had been caught off guard. The fact that Chairman Im Jin-young is coming to the US has not been reported in the media. What reason could someone so busy with group management have for suddenly appearing here? The issue of equity exchange can be discussed after I return to Korea. However, the reason for bringing it up at this gathering is that now, while struggling with mass production, is the perfect timing. In other words, from the perspective of Samsung Electronics, it is determined to be the best opportunity to acquire Keros shares at the lowest price. So, after pointing out the problems with mass production, they likely bring up the equity exchange while pretending to make concessions. If I had suddenly received a proposal, I might have been flustered and dragged along throughout the negotiations, but thanks to the foresight, I had some time to think. I mentioned that we could supply software to other companies, but that also has its issues. If cars equipped with the same autonomous driving technology are released, who would buy our cars? Once again, Chairman Im pointed that out. If that happens, the differentiation of Keros cars will disappear. However, it would allow us to quickly seize the autonomous driving market. Manufacturers developing their own technologies won't adopt Keros software even if it means giving up their own technology. That may be true for companies with some technological capability, but the situation is different for those who are already behind in the competition. Once software becomes dependent, it's hard to break free. Therefore, brands like Mercedes, BMW, and Nikola are likely to reject our offer even if we provide the software for free. However, smaller companies with less scale and technology would willingly embrace the hand we extend. Chairman Im looked troubled. I acknowledge that Keros has high technological capability and growth potential. The ratio calculated considering that is 1 to 4. 150 trillion is out of the question. That is true. However, while the value of Keros is important, what's more crucial is how much value Keros holds for Samsung Electronics. The reason for paying a premium above the market price in M&A is to expect synergies from it. Samsung Electronics paid a 30% premium on the stock price during the acquisition of Herman. Herman's value was estimated at 6 trillion when operating independently, but it is believed to exceed 9 trillion since integrating into the Samsung Electronics group. What will the driver do while the car drives itself? They will likely engage in other leisure activities like searching for news, watching movies, listening to music, or resting. Since the self-driving car is a connected car equipped with GPS and various communication devices, Samsung Electronics is naturally considering integration with its smartphones for in-car entertainment and external control. Samsung Electronics is the world's #1 smartphone seller, selling over 300 million units annually. However, they are fiercely competing in the premium market against brands like Apple and facing intense pressure from Chinese companies in the mid-range market. For Samsung Electronics to maintain its dominance in the smartphone market, it needs to offer differentiated value compared to other companies, and autonomous vehicles will play a crucial role in this. Looking back, it was also Chairman Im Jin-young who extended his hand first during the Samsung SB collaboration. This is because there is much to gain from our partnership. In the end, it's disappointing for them, isn't it? For the continued cooperation between both companies, wouldn't it be better for Keros to hold as many shares of Samsung Electronics as possible? That way they would be more generous with the volume. Even so, a 1-to-2 ratio is impossible. Shareholders will never agree. While a 1-to-4 ratio might be considered a managerial discretion, a 1-to-2 ratio could lead to accusations of breach of duty. I have thought of a way regarding that. Isn't it better to decide on the future value in the future? How about offering a right of first refusal to exchange shares in a year? Chairman Im Jin-young showed an expression of having received a solid blow. The negotiation went on for quite a while. What started as a discussion about the equity swap ratio expanded to various conditions across the entire business. I may fall short in overall management capability, but when it comes to equity negotiations, I'm no slouch. I've closely observed these processes while investing in startups, either negotiating myself or watching Hyunju negotiate. After several hours of discussions, we aligned our opinions. We first agreed to exchange 3% of Samsung Electronics for 10.5% of Keros. Additionally, we decided to exchange another 7% of Samsung Electronics for 14% of Keros a year later. However, Samsung Electronics secured a buyback option. After a year, based on the stock trend of Samsung and the valuation of Keros, if the ratio seems unfavorable, they can choose not to exercise the option or partially do so. It's essentially a call option. Several conditions were added. Since the goal was to strengthen the partnership, there was a ban on selling shares for 10 years, priority allocation of production volume to Samsung Electronics, preferential and continuous cooperation on comprehensive vehicle solutions including autonomous driving, telematics and in-car entertainment, and a right of first refusal for Samsung in case of future sales of Keros shares. Once the negotiations on the contract details were finished, a lawyer from Samsung's legal team brought in a contract prepared in the existing format. Since OTK Company has a U.S. corporation, the contract was drafted in both Korean and English. On our side, Ellie reviewed the contract on my behalf. Ellie, having primarily dealt with M&AMP, alongside Hyunju at the Golden Gate Asia branch, is an expert in this field. She meticulously examined every detail without overlooking a single word. In contracts, a single word or comma can change the meaning. For instance, principal guarantee in an investment contract means a 100% guarantee of the principal, while principal preservation implies an effort to protect the principal but does not hold the party responsible for losses. Ellie requested modifications for a few phrases and words, and the lawyer from Samsung accepted them. After both lawyers completed their reviews of the contract, Chairman Im Jin-young and I each provided our electronic signatures. The issue of handling treasury stock must be resolved through a board resolution. I also need to obtain the consent of Keros management for conditions beyond the equity exchange. Thus, the contract will take effect afterward. There should be no issues on our side, and since Chairman Im Jin-young has solid control, the board will likely pass the resolution without problems. Once the share exchange is executed, Samsung Electronics will immediately become the second largest shareholder of Keros, holding 10.5% of its shares. It's uncertain whether they will exercise the purchase request later, but this alone marks the realization of the predictions. If 1 year later Samsung Electronics exercises the purchase request, they will hold 24.5% of Keros, while Keros will hold 10% of Samsung Electronics. Keros will rise to become the largest shareholder of Samsung Electronics, surpassing the National Pension Service. Chairman Im Jin-young sighed as he spoke. Now, persuading the shareholders will be our task. While the board of directors is scarcely more than a rubber stamp, the shareholders are different. Chairman Im's stake in Samsung Electronics is less than 3%. Even when adding up shares from affiliates that hold power, it amounts to about 20%. In contrast, the Korean National Pension has over 9%, and foreign pension funds and firms hold 53%. Major shareholders will need to meet and explain the situation to convince others. For now, the shares they are exchanging amount to only 3%. Although the exchange ratio of 1 to 3.5 may seem like a loss, considering the various conditions tied to the contract, they are likely to be convinced. They will probably think a 1 to 2 ratio is unreasonable, but that will be decided when the time comes. If at that point it's determined that Keros's value does not reach half of Samsung Electronics' value, there's no obligation to exercise the purchase request. I thought of the largest shareholder of Samsung Electronics. The national pension will likely oppose, right? Unsung Motor and Park Si-hyung will certainly not welcome the merger of Keros and Samsung Electronics. Given the aftermath of the savings bank crisis, their influence over the National Pension Service will be diminished. They'll also be busy fending off political attacks from the opposition. Regardless, the collusion between politics and business is an old practice and few people, politicians or bureaucrats, are completely free from Samsung Group's influence. Probably, there are still a few individuals related to Samsung Group within the National Pension Service. Of course, if the president issues a strong directive, it might change things. But as I just mentioned, it's not that kind of situation now. If we can get the support of other shareholders, it won't be easy for the national pension to find legitimate grounds for opposition. You've already thought about the future developments. You're quite confident. Chairman Im Jin-yong smiled wryly. Still, I should go and express my regrets. I envy you being a junior who doesn't have to worry about shareholders at times like this. What a fuss. We're going to invest in facilities for immediate mass production. We've already allocated quantities for AP and semiconductors to the Austin and Weizong plants. I burst into laughter. You've prepared everything. We talked in a relaxed atmosphere. Chairman Im Jin-yong opened up about his thoughts. As you know, the two main pillars of Samsung Electronics are smartphones and semiconductors. However, the growth of smartphones is slowly tapering off, and the current semiconductor boom will eventually end. Both sectors face significant challenges from China. Chinese smartphones are entering the global market with excellent cost performance and a vast domestic market. Moreover, China has announced a national semiconductor initiative, making substantial investments. While the technology gap is still significant and not an immediate threat, who knows what will happen in 10 years? Thinking back, who could have imagined that Chinese companies would grow their technological capabilities to this extent just 10 years ago? My grandfather started with semiconductors and my father nurtured the smartphone business. Preparing for what comes next is my responsibility. So you've chosen the automotive electronics industry. Chairman Im Jin-yong nodded. It's a large market with rapid development. Autonomous driving is at the core of the fourth industrial revolution. Not only automobile companies but also electronics, IT and ride-sharing companies from around the world are entering the market and competing fiercely. BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Toyota, Hyundai, Nvidia, Tesla, Apple, Google and eVer among others. Level 3 has already been commercialized, and some companies are nearing completion of Level 4. Leading companies like Google and eVer have succeeded in driving autonomously for thousands of kilometers. However, being close and being complete are two different things. Completing the technology and mass production are also different matters. Most companies are diving into technology development, but this situation won't last long. In a few years, the market will be restructured around 2 or 3 companies with the highest level of completion, similar to how the smartphone OS market consolidated with Apple's iOS and Google's Android in just a few years. I nodded. In a few years, other companies will catch up to Kairos' technological prowess. But if they release mass production vehicles first, the technology gap will widen. Quality guarantees quantity. When China entered the high-speed rail business, everyone laughed. In reality, China demonstrated operational inexperience and caused numerous accidents. However, a few years later, it succeeded in winning the contract for California's high-speed rail project, shocking everyone. That's the power of the Chinese domestic market. China caught up by operating 100 routes in 1 year, accumulating the expertise that other countries built over 10 years with 10 routes. Now that the contract is over, I can speak honestly. I believe Kairos will establish a monopoly, not just 2 or 3 companies. Once they release mass production vehicles while other companies collect data with dozens or hundreds of experimental cars, Kairos will collect various data with millions of cars. Based on that data, they will improve the system and release better products. Will the cars sell well? I do feel some anxiety deep down. If the new car fails, not only Kairos but also OTK company will suffer significant damage. In response to my question, Chairman Im Jin-yong simply replied, "You should worry more about how much you can produce rather than how much will sell." I laughed out loud. After the conversation ended, he stood up from his seat. "Well then, I'll see you at the presentation." Yes. As I looked out the window, I realized the sun had already set. Noticing it, I remembered that I had skipped lunch. Suddenly, a wave of hunger hit me. I was about to suggest we go eat, but Ellie was already staring at me intently with her chin resting on her hands. "What's wrong? You're just too cool." "Excuse me." Ellie narrowed her eyes playfully. "Negotiating with the chairman of Samsung Group without backing down at all and getting what you wanted. You were really impressive today, weren't you?" I humbly replied, "It's not always like this."